Hello and welcome to Chapter 15, Troubleshooting Windows Startup. Another important chapter. Another important chapter if you want to be a great computer tech. This is also another chapters that you have to keep in mind and always refer to, especially if you got an interview for a help desk position. You want to be able to go over chapter 12, 13, 14, and 15, and 16 as well. All right. Well, actually, the whole thing, of course. But these chapters, I would say 13, 14, and 15 is, if you have more knowledge in these chapters, will make you a really great troubleshooter. All right. So don't forget, I'm going to ask you to take notes and submit them as homework. So let's begin. All right. So we need to define the difference between hard or cold boot. A hard or cold boot means really the same thing. It means turning the power switch on and off. On the other hand, soft boot or warm boot means you're just doing a restart or reload sometimes. Okay? Table 15-1 on this page 827, shows all the components that are needed to start Windows. I know we've discussed the booting process, but we're going to go over it in details. So the more you know about the details about how the system boots up, the better you're going to be able to know what the problem is and how it works. All right, so let's start by we're going to follow these charts. So what we're going to do, we're going to write down the numbers, one by one, on how this boot process happens. So the first thing that happens, number one, okay, we're going to follow these two charts. It was very important. I mean, please read them at least. Read them carefully, because the better you understand the startup, the more likely you'll be able to solve startup problems. All right, so number one, the onboard RAM is accessible to the BIOS UEFI, holds an inventory of hardware devices, hardware settings, security passwords, date and time, and startup settings. All right, the startup BIOS UEFI reads this information and then surveys the hardware devices it finds present, comparing it with the list that is kept in the RAM. Okay, so that's step number one. Step number two, the BIOS UEFI runs the power on self-test, the post. The post is a series of tests to find out if the firmware can communicate correctly with the essential hardware's components required for a successful boot. So the post is going to check out all the hardware that is needed to make sure that the boot process is successful. Number three, based on the information kept on the onboard RAM, startup UEFI loads the UEFI boot manager and device drivers. The BIOS UEFI then turns to the hard drive or other boot devices to locate and launch the Windows Boot Manager. If the BIOS UEFI cannot find a Windows Boot Manager, or it cannot turn over the operation to it, then one of the following errors is going to happen, which means you don't have an operating system, or the hard drive can't see it. It's going to say missing operating system, error loading. Let me see. Yeah, right up here. Error loading operating system. Windows failed to load, or an invalid partition table. All right, number four. We're writing these down. Windows Boot Manager reads the settings in the BCD. And the BCD, by the way, stands for the Boot Configuration Data Store. All right, number five. So you can go through these options. Step number five, Windows bootloader, which is the winload.exe or winload.efi, is responsible for loading Windows. All right. So here are A to F, and how does the bootloader? What does the bootloader do? The first step it does is it loads the OS, the operating system kernel. That the file is called ntos krnl.exe. So that's the first step the bootloader does. Then it loads HAL, HAL. Then it loads the system registry hive, reads the registry hive that it just loaded, for BIOS system and load device driver, starts the memory paging process, turns over the startup to the OS kernel. So it turns over back to the ntoskennl.exe file. All right, so and then what does the OS kernel do when he takes over? Remember, he's the one that communicates with the hard drive, with the hardware. He will activate. He will activate HAL and read more of the memory, build into the memory registry, build all that information into the registry key, the HKLM/hardware, start our critical services and drivers, and then start the session manager. That's the smss.exe in user mode. And that's the one that loads the logon manager. That's this guy right here. This is what you see. All right, so we went through all of these 10 steps. So please write those down. It's very important to understand what we are doing here. All right, now let's understand what you need to do even before any problems occur. All right, what tools do you have? Where can you go? How to solve these problems if anything happens before the startup? So on this page 835, figure 9, this is very important to know, it shows the methods to boot the system. You'll know what you need to do before a problem occurs. Tools to diagnose and repair the Windows are shown in purple boxes. So these are the tools. If you need to know any of the tools, anything in the purple boxes. Windows recovery environment is in the pink, and you'll be able to access that as well in the pink area. All right, so here we go. Let's write this down. What do you need to do before a problem occurs? Or when the problem occurs. Before the problem occurs, I'm sorry. So before anything happens, when everything is running wonderfully, perfect, first thing you do is create a system image. So we went over that on the last chapter. Number 2. Step number 1 is you back up the data, right? Back up all the data that you need. Step number 2, you create a system image. Am I right? That's correct. So keep good backups, create a system image. Step number 3. By the way, how do you configure? Configure Windows 10 to use the F8 startup. So if you press F8, you're going to get the advanced boot option. So how do you do that? By default, it's not active. To enable it, you have to use the command right there, bcd edit /edit. Default boot menu policy legacy. All right, number 4. Step number 4, create a recovery boot media, maybe on a DVD or a CD. Okay, you can do that by going to the system repair disk. All right, open the control panel, or you can go to the recovery drive. If the drive is completely failed, you can do that. Create a recovery drive, open the control panel into the classic view, and then click on recovery. Or you can launch Windows recovery environment. That's Windows RE from the Windows setup DVD or flash. You have that. All right. Moving on. That's right there. That's what we just finished talking about. Now, what are some of the tools for the least invasive solution? All right. So the first thing you're going to do, that's repair. How do you do a repair disk? Windows Media. So this is also really nice tools that you can use. All right, if you're having, because a lot of the problems, somebody will bring in your PC and say, I can't boot my system. Can you please help me out? All right, so this is a good chapter for that, because that's where most of the problems are. If after you boot up and you got problems, then you move on to chapter 16. That's where all the help for, after you finished booting up, you've got issues. That's chapter 16. Chapter 15 is for anything during boot up, which happens to have a lot of problems. All right, so tools for the least invasive solutions. Number one, you want to launch the recovery environment, the Windows recovery environment. So step number one to do that, in Windows 10 setting app, open the settings app and click update and security in the left pan. As you can see right here, click on recovery. Under advanced setup, you can click restart now. Or you can do Control Shift plus restart. From the Windows 10 start menu, click on power icon, then press and hold the Shift key and click restart. You could do that too. From the command prompt, you could do that too as well. In Windows 10, 8, or 7, the command prompt windows, enter the command shutdown space /R /O. All right, so right there. The /R parameter instructs the computer to restart, and the /O parameter opens the Windows RE after restart. Step number 4. Windows detects startup problems and launches automatic diagnostic and repairs. You probably don't even have to do anything. Windows usually does that. If you restart the computer several times within a few minutes, Windows will detect there's an error during startup, and it will automatically launch the diagnostic for you. All right, so worst case scenario, just keep restarting it if you don't have anything, and Windows will detect there's a startup problem and will launch the diagnostics for you. Number 5, boot from a USB recovery drive, a DVD system repair disk, or a Windows setup DVD or USB drive. These boot recovery medias will give you the option to launch Windows RE. You might have to adjust the BIOS UEFI settings to get the boot sequence going, right? And number 6 is you press F8 during startup, right? And that will do that. That will do the same thing for you. Get you the startup advanced boot. All right, so let's talk about startup repair. To run the startup repair in Windows RE, go down to the advanced option screen, and you can refer to the 15-19. Actually, here, this one right here. This is the advanced option that you will get when you press F8, and you can choose repair, startup repair. You'll be good to go, right? Changing startup settings. You could do that too. The startup repair. Now let's talk about the startup settings. The startup settings options on the advanced options screen, as you can see in this figure right here, sorry, is available only when Windows RE is launched from the hard drive rather than on the other media. All right, so let's go over all these. Press F1, so you got to make sure you write these down in the startup settings. So when you press 1 or F1, you're going to enable debugging. When you press F2 or F2, you enable boot logging. Press F3 and F3. I'm sorry. Press 3 or F3, you enable low resolution video. That's 640 by 480. If you press 4 or F4, you enable safe mode. 5 or F5, you enable safe mode with networking. 6 or F6, you enable safe mode with command prompt. 7 with F7, you disable driver signature enforcement. Write these down, don't forget, all right? All 10 of them. 8 or F8, you are going to disable early launch anti-malware. 9 or F9, you're disabling automatic restart system on failure. And if you press 10 or F10, you are going to return to the startup screen menu. All right, we are finished with video 1. So write down what I told you to write down, upload that as homework, and we'll start with system restored on the next video. I'll see you then.